More than a decade ago, this guy invented Bitcoin and the distributed ledger technology that is behind most cryptocurrencies today. A brilliant invention that deserves at least one Nobel Prize, or perhaps even more than one. By solving the double spend problem and removing trust from financial interactions, he made it possible to have a truly digital currency. Before this milestone in computer science, you couldn't have a digital currency because even a mid-tier hacker could make infinite copies of it. A currency that can be copied and spent an infinite number of times makes for a very shitty currency. Today, we have thousands of cryptocurrencies, and while many of them are built on this great technology, the only thing they solve is the money problem for the founders of these cryptocurrencies. If you're new to this space, you'll find out soon enough that it's extremely hard to navigate it without getting burned. So here's what I'll do. I will centralize in this video the most important information that you need in order to navigate this landscape. By the end of this video, I can guarantee that you will know almost as much as someone who has been in this market for years, and a lot more than someone who just jumped in today. This is going to be a long video, and it's going to have a high density of information, but I'll do my best to present it as simply as possible. I'll also do my best to be as objective as possible. I decided that the best way to achieve this is not to present you with neutral information or simple facts about cryptocurrencies, but by representing both sides of the argument as best as possible. Basically, I'll do my best to steelman the arguments of the people who are pro-cryptocurrency, and also steelman the arguments of the people who are against cryptocurrencies. You can then make up your own mind about them. Let's start with the big question. Why do cryptocurrencies matter? In order to answer this, you need to have at least a basic understanding of the technology behind them. I insist on this because I am the guy who used to mine Bitcoin 10 years ago, and the reason that I stopped was because back then I didn't understand what exactly was I mining. Since then, Bitcoin went up more than 10,000x. I partially missed the best performing asset of my life because I lacked a crucial piece of information that would have convinced me to continue mining it. By the time I stumbled upon that key piece of information, the price was much higher and I had to buy it from exchanges because it was impossible to mine it at home. So what is that crucial piece of information? It's the distributed ledger technology behind cryptocurrencies. It sounds fancy, but it's basically a database which stores information. Databases are behind most things you do on the internet. Facebook and Twitter store information about the user profiles in a database, and that's how they know who posted what, and that's how they can also delete your posts. Google stores information in a database about how websites rank based on certain keywords, and that's how it's able to show you search results. Your bank stores information in a database about your account balance and your transactions. We can go through countless examples, but what they all have in common is that they are centralized. Behind those databases, there's always a company and a server owned by that company. There's literally nothing that prevents your bank from going into their database and changing your account balance or restricting access to your account. Obviously, they won't do that because it would be business suicide and possibly jail time when people find out. But at the end of the day, it is a relationship of trust. You trust them that they won't do that because of X and Y reasons. A distributed ledger eliminates that need for trust, because a distributed ledger is not stored on a central server and is not owned by a company. A distributed ledger is stored on a decentralized network. So where is this network? What are its components and what keeps it up and running? The answer is quite simple actually. The network is held together by the computers of the people from all over the world who want to participate in this network. Anyone who wants to join the network and who downloads the software to connect to the network can do that. There is no single entity which controls this network. There is no person who can go into a database and change the numbers whenever he wants. because everyone who participates in the network holds a copy of that database. If you wanted to maliciously edit the ledger, you'd have to hack millions of computers simultaneously, which is not technically feasible. But if this ledger or this database is so hard to edit, then how does it get updated and how does it hold the account balances and the transaction history of the users? This is the brilliant part behind this technology. The cryptography behind it is highly complex, and it would take an entire video just to explain. But the simplified answer is that the ledger only gets updated when certain cryptographic rules are met and only when the computers in the network reach a consensus. That's what makes it so resilient. You can't hack it and you can't destroy it. You could nuke half the world and destroy half the computers in the world, and the network would still be up. As long as there are at least a handful of computers that continue working to maintain the database, process the transactions, and update it with new transactions, the network is safe. The fact that Bitcoin is worth hundreds of billions of dollars and nobody managed to hack it or destroy it yet in almost 12 years is proof enough of that. And this is not for lack of trying. If a hacker wants to make money, Bitcoin is by far the best target he can tackle because it has the biggest bounty in the world. Hopefully this convinced you that the network is extremely secure. In fact, it's a lot more secure than your bank account, and it might possibly be the most secure network in the world. But now let's pause for a second and rewind, because we got a bit ahead of ourselves with all this talk about security, transactions, and account balances. Let's rewind more than a decade ago, and let's say you are Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of this distributed ledger technology. You developed the theory on how this should work, you solved the double spend problem that not even guys like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel could solve back in the PayPal days, and you even developed the software for people to download and create the network. But what are you going to do with this technology, and how are you going to convince people to join and grow this network in the first place? Why would they use their computer's resources to keep this network alive? Obviously, you need an incentive system. Otherwise, people will just ignore it. So you start thinking about use cases for this technology. While many of them cross your mind, one of them stands out. You're going to use this technology as a platform for a new currency. On top of that, the people who decide to support this network and keep it alive will also be paid in this currency as an incentive. In the real world, Satoshi probably started with the goal of creating a decentralized currency and developed the distributed ledger technology to help him achieve this goal. I switched the chicken and the egg for my example because it's easier to understand this way, and it helps you see why a currency is one of the best use cases for this technology. So why currency exactly? Because if you build a currency on top of the distributed ledger technology, it will be a decentralized currency, which means it will not be controlled by a government. It won't be devalued by a government or a central bank by printing more of it, because the supply and inflation rate is determined algorithmically. It won't be censored by a government, bank, or corporation. It will allow people to transact freely peer-to-peer without having to trust each other or go through a central entity like a bank or a credit card network. It will work globally with minimal transaction fees. It will theoretically store value because the supply is predictable. It will even allow people to cross borders and store their wealth in their heads in the form of brain wallets. This means they will have complete ownership of their wealth, which will make it practically impossible to confiscate. When you put all these attributes together, it's not hard to see why a currency was one of the best use cases for a decentralized ledger in the first place, and why people decided to participate in this network willingly. So with this new information in mind, let's define what Bitcoin is. First, Bitcoin is a protocol. A protocol is a set of rules and guidelines for communicating data. This protocol is what allows computers to connect to each other and form the Bitcoin network. The network created by these computers is what stores the database or the distributed ledger. This network is what processes the transactions, and this network also updates the database by following the rules defined by the protocol. At the same time, Bitcoin is also a unit of account, or a cryptocurrency. The network does not process transactions in euros or dollars. It can only process transactions in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency, because that's what it was designed to do. In order to transact on this network, you need to connect to it. To connect to it, you need a wallet. This wallet is simply your interface with the network. Just like your banking app on your phone is the interface with your bank's network. To connect to your bank account, you need a username and a password. To connect to the Bitcoin network, you need a public key and a private key. The wallet will generate these for you, and they will be unique to you. The public key is used by you to check your account balance and to give to people who want to send funds to you. It's like a PayPal address or a bank account number. The private key is the one that allows you to actually access these funds and do whatever you want to do with them. The private key is like your password, and you should never show it to anyone. As long as you have your private key written somewhere, or you have it memorized in your head, tattooed on your body, or stored on a piece of paper in your ass, you can cross any border with billions of dollars. You can then access those funds from anywhere and from any device with an internet connection. Let's ask the next big question now. How do you value something like Bitcoin? How much is a network like this worth? Is it worth as much as all the banks in the world? Because it technically provides you with an account that stores your money and you can transfer that money to other people, just like you can at a bank? Is it worth as much as Visa and MasterCard because it's also a peer-to-peer payment system? Is it worth as much as SWIFT because it is a global financial network that settles transactions in under 10 minutes? Is it worth as much as the entire supply of gold because in theory it stores value, and unlike gold, it also allows people to transfer that value instantly? Is it worth as much as all of them combined? Is it worth nothing because everyone can create a cryptocurrency and we can have an infinity of them that can solve the same problems? I don't know, but it's something worth thinking about. Hopefully by this point, you understand what a distributed ledger is, you understand why a cryptocurrency is one of the best use cases for this technology, and you understand what Bitcoin is. But here's the thing. Bitcoin works on a blockchain. A blockchain is just one type of distributed ledger. There are other implementations of this distributed ledger technology and many protocols that work with different rules and incentive systems. I don't have time to go through all of them. What I do have time is to show you a list of properties that a distributed ledger should have. No matter what type of cryptocurrency you decide to invest in, and no matter what type of distributed ledger it is built on, if it doesn't have even one of these properties, you should be skeptical of it. The first property is decentralization. As mentioned earlier, cryptocurrencies are, or at least they should be, decentralized. Not all of them are decentralized, yet they pretend to be, or pretend that it doesn't matter. It does matter. Decentralization is achieved because there's a network of nodes or computers that keep the system up and running. The more computers there are, and the more spread out on the planet they are, the more resilient the network is. An entire country like China could decide to crack down on the miners of a cryptocurrency, but if there are thousands of other nodes in hundreds of other countries, the network is fine. This is what the internet was initially supposed to be. A resilient network that survives even a nuclear war. The second property is censorship resistance and immutability. By its nature, a distributed ledger cannot be censored. This property derives from the first one, decentralization. If it's not decentralized, then there will always be a central entity that could censor or be forced to censor the network by a government or an institution. Once something is written on the distributed ledger, nobody should be able to modify or remove it. If it can be censored, and if it's not immutable, then it's shit, and it will be abused or compromised at some point. This censorship resistance and this immutability is the reason why Julian Assange and WikiLeaks uploaded their dead man switch files on the Bitcoin network and not another network. The third property is ownership. A few years ago, Obama derogatorily said about cryptocurrencies that they allow everyone to have their own Swiss bank account. In fact, it's more like having your own Swiss bank. If you hold the private keys, only you control your coins. If a distributed ledger doesn't give you ownership, then it's bullshit. The fourth property is removing the middleman. Cryptocurrencies are already removing middlemen like banks and credit card companies when it comes to financial transactions. But this technology can be used to develop decentralized applications that remove middlemen like Uber, Airbnb, Facebook, and so on. It could, in theory, disrupt entire industries if implemented well. If a distributed ledger doesn't remove a middleman, or if it does remove a middleman but it replaces it with another, then be skeptical of its promises. Now that you understand what attributes a distributed ledger must have, let's talk about the different types of cryptocurrencies. The term cryptocurrency is somewhat of a misnomer nowadays. The reason for this is because when Satoshi invented the blockchain, the best use case and also its intended purpose was indeed to make a currency that had all the properties mentioned earlier. Nowadays, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies. Basically, people took this technology, modified it, and sometimes improved it to create new projects that were not necessarily intended to work as transactional platforms and currencies. Some of them were indeed currencies with different properties than Bitcoin, like faster transactions or better privacy. Others were platforms that allowed people to build things on top of them. Many of them, though, were simple dApps, or decentralized applications built on top of these platforms. There is an important distinction between transactional currencies, platform currencies, and utility tokens used by dApps. We're gonna look at them now. Transactional currencies, as their name implies, are cryptocurrencies that are intended to be used strictly for transactions, for storing value, or even for anonymous payments. Sure, you can do other things with them, but it's not very efficient. For example, you can even store files on the Bitcoin network, but it will cost you a lot, because it was not meant for that. The reason why transactional currencies are in a class of their own is because a currency can be worth whatever the market decides it is worth, and has no upper cap. Its value is strictly based on supply and demand. But surely there must be an upper cap. It can't be infinite. Of course. But it depends on a lot of factors. If only a small group of people, for example an entire town, decides to use that currency, the market cap will be small. On the other hand, if an entire country does that, the market cap can jump in the billions. If the entire planet adopts the currency, then we're talking trillions. If multiple planets use a cryptocurrency, then we're talking hundreds of trillions. I know it's getting absurd, but I need to use this example to make my point, and make you understand what exactly you are buying and how much higher can that investment realistically go. The point is that when you buy a transactional currency like Bitcoin, Monero, or Zcash, you're basically betting on the fact that the governments of the world will never stop devaluing their currencies through inflation. They will abuse their power to censor transactions, and they might even confiscate money or gold from the population. You're also betting that these actions of the governments will force the populations of these countries to begin using cryptocurrencies to avoid this. People got a taste of this with Venezuela, Argentina, and Iran, where the adoption of cryptocurrencies skyrocketed once people realized the consequences of holding their local currencies, which inflated every day. In Venezuela, for example, the inflation rate between 2016 and 2019 was almost 54 million%. Yes, that's the real number. When a government starts debasing the currency, when it confiscates the physical gold, and when it doesn't allow people to exchange their local currency for dollars or euros, the only thing left for the people to do is to hide their wealth in cryptocurrencies. The conclusion is that when you're buying transactional currencies, you're betting that in the long run, the governments of the world will become shittier and shittier, and this will force people to adopt cryptocurrencies to bypass the shittiness of their governments. Next, we have platform currencies. As mentioned previously, platforms allow people to build their own applications on top of them. These applications will consume network resources that will need to be paid in the platform's currency. This creates demand for the currency, which pushes its price up. It's like back in the old days, when you had to pay for your internet usage depending on how many megabytes you used. So, to keep this simple, when you're buying a platform currency, you're betting on the fact that the platform will be good enough to be used by many developers to build dApps on it. You're also betting on the fact that these dApps will become popular and will be used by people, because when a dApp becomes popular, it consumes more resources in the network. More resources consumed means more demand for the platform's currency to pay for this usage. Investing in platform currencies is like investing in infrastructure. You're buying the railroads or the internet cables, and then you wait for people to build stuff that uses this infrastructure. The third type of cryptocurrencies are utility tokens, which are used in dApps. As mentioned earlier, dApps are built on top of platforms. You can think of dApps as regular apps that are decentralized because they run on a decentralized platform. For example, let's say someone creates a dApp that is capable of doing 3D rendering by using the computers in the network. If someone wants to render a complex 3D model, he would have to pay for that computational job in that dApp's utility token. So, when you're buying utility tokens for dApps, you're betting that the people who created them will do their jobs, their dApps will get adoption, and the demand for the tokens will increase because people will use them to pay for the services provided by the dApps. It's similar in a way to buying stocks, except that these tokens don't give you ownership in the company. If you decide to buy the utility token for a certain dApp, you should always ask yourself the following questions. Where will the money come from? Who's gonna pay for the services provided by this dApp? How big is the market that they are tackling? What percentage of that market are they capable of taking? Do people really care that the app is decentralized? Does the dApp provide something better or cheaper than a centralized app? Does this dApp really benefit from all those attributes of a decentralized ledger? Or would it work as well or even better as a centralized app? Basically, think of yourself as a venture capitalist and do the same type of analysis that they do when investing in startups. Unlike established transactional currencies or platform currencies, you have to be ruthless when judging dApps, because the barrier of entry for these is very low, and this is where most of the scams happen. It's hard to create a transactional currency that can steal market cap from Bitcoin or Litecoin. And it's hard to develop a new platform that can compete with existing platforms. But it's very easy to make a new dApp. Every dipshit with a basic understanding of programming can create a dApp and pretend it's the next Airbnb to draw suckers in. So, to recap, buying transactional currencies means betting against shitty governments. Buying platform currencies is similar to investing in infrastructure, and buying dApps is similar to investing in startups. As you probably noticed by now, the risk goes proportionally higher the lower you go down the tier. If you buy an established transactional currency like Bitcoin, you might experience some significant bear markets, but it's highly unlikely that Bitcoin will ever die. You might even make some decent money with it, although it's unlikely you'll get to experience another 100x from here. Next, you'll probably be looking at some platform currencies. These are less safe than transactional currencies like Bitcoin, and there is currently a platform war for adoption and scalability. Nobody knows exactly which platform will win this war, but if you pick the right one, you might catch the next 100x or even 1000x. Finally, you can scrape some shitcoins from the bottom of the barrel and invest in some dApps. These are pumping 10x all the time, but they also scam you or fail just as often. You could, in theory, find a shitcoin capable of pumping 10 times in price, sell it, buy another and ride it for another 10x, sell that again, and if you manage to find a third one, you technically multiplied your money 1000 times. The probability of doing that is so low and the risk is so insanely high that you shouldn't even think about doing this with money that you're afraid of losing, because you will most certainly lose everything. Now, you might think that after everything we discussed here, you have a pretty good idea about how to filter through these coins, how to ask the right questions, and how to avoid getting scammed. After doing some due diligence, you might even end up with a portfolio of high-quality coins that are destined to make you rich. Hold your horses, because it's time to drop some hard-to-swallow black pills now. I said at the beginning that I will represent both sides of the argument. It's now time to show you what's behind the curtain as well, which means we need to talk about the drawbacks of cryptocurrencies. This is mostly an unregulated market, and it's full of scammers and scam projects. There's a reason why the crypto market is considered one of the riskiest in the world, and that reason has less to do with the high volatility and more to do with the number of scams. You have to do extreme due diligence before even considering investing in less established coins. I can't stress this point enough. Do not take anything at its face value and always dig deeper. Ask questions. Look at websites that review the code. Ask friends who know how to code to look at it. Interact with the people involved in the projects that you want to invest in and ask them hard questions. If they ignore you, ban you, or give you nonsensical answers, avoid them like the plague. Their incentive is to get your money, so make them work hard for it. Here's an example of a big scam that some of you might remember, even if you weren't participating in the crypto market. And here's how you would have known it's a scam. There was a shitcoin at some point called BitConnect. The company behind it promised people that if they invest their money with them, they would get a 1% gain per day. All you had to do was to give them your Bitcoin, and in exchange, they would give you this BitConnect token, which they controlled, by the way. Then you had to wait until their magic trading bot used your Bitcoin to make mad gains in the crypto market. Every day, you would receive more BitConnect in your account, which would apparently reflect the gains made by the bot. These BitConnect tokens would keep piling up in your account, and on paper, it would seem like you were becoming rich. The promise was that after a lockup period, you could eventually exchange your BitConnect tokens back to Bitcoin, so you could cash in on those gains. For the people who are not financially savvy, 1% per day might seem reasonable. This is why the scam worked, because it seemed reasonable. For anyone who understands compound interest, however, this is beyond insane. If you did the math on this, it would mean that if you invested a couple $1,000s with them at a 1% compounded interest rate per day, in 5 years you would have $154 billion. At the time this scam was operating, the entire cryptocurrency market wasn't even worth $154 billion. Things got even more absurd the more money you put in. If you invested $15,000, in 5 years, you'd have $1 trillion. This is how insane and stupid these scams can get. And yet people still fall for them because they refuse to do some cognitive effort and ask some basic questions. The second drawback is the market manipulation. This market is still young and relatively small, which makes it very easy for whales to manipulate it. Whales are people or groups of people who own large percentages of the supply of a coin and have the capital to make the price move. They usually make a coin pump to draw in other people, and then they sell to them while the price is high until the price collapses. This is usually common in coins with a smaller market cap, but it's not impossible to see this manipulation in the more established coins as well. They can also do the opposite. They can sell a lot and push the price down to scare people and make them sell. They will then buy the coins for cheap and sell them later at a higher price. There is not much you can do against whales and market manipulations, because they are richer than you and smarter than you. Greater men than you and I have been tricked by them and will continue to be tricked. The third drawback is the volatility. In crypto, it's not surprising to see the market go down 80% and then recover, only to go down 80% again. Volatility usually drops with the size of the market. The bigger the market, the lower the volatility. Crypto is still small compared to other markets, and it might take years before it reaches a volatility similar to the stock market. High volatility doesn't mean that the price can only go down fast. It can also mean that the price can go up quickly as well. This is why it's healthy not to get married to your shitcoins. And this is why you should sell them if you see abnormal growth rates. Any growth rate that is exponential or more than exponential is suspicious. Don't make the mistake of looking at your portfolio, seeing that number there, and thinking that's your net worth. It might drop 50% in the next 24 hours. Remember, it's not yours until you cashed out. While we are on the topic of volatility and market size, it needs to be mentioned that you shouldn't put too much trust in the market cap of a coin. The market cap is calculated by taking the last known transacted price of a coin and multiplying it by the number of coins in circulation. This means that I can get 10 friends with some capital, buy a coin that is worth, let's say, $100, and then trade it between us on exchanges for higher and higher prices until we push it to $1,000. From the outside, it might seem that this coin is pumping hard, and we might even draw new people in to buy it. But once we stop doing this wash trading, the price drops to its real level. This is hard to do with coins that already have a high market cap and a high volume, like Bitcoin. But it's very easy to do with low volume coins. Be very careful and skeptical when coins pump 10x out of nowhere, and don't take the bait. The fifth drawback is the nonsense. There were, and still are, cryptocurrencies in the top 20 that are not even decentralized. Some were even outright scams, and yet they stayed there for months or even years. At this point in crypto's lifespan, a few things make sense. The value of the coins increases not because of the fundamentals, but because of hype, marketing, hysteria, FOMO, lies, fake partnerships, and so on. If you think you can do a Warren Buffett-style analysis on crypto, buy something for its fundamentals and hope that the market figures it out as well, you might be in for a long wait. The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. You need to be mentally prepared To see a coin go up 10x, even though you are 100% sure it's a scam, while you hold one of the good coins that does absolutely nothing for months or even years. The sixth drawback that you need to be aware of, which is somewhat related to my point about the scams and the nonsense, is the non-existent use cases. Not everything needs to be decentralized. Not everything needs to run on a blockchain or other distributed ledger technologies. Not everything needs a token. Become savvy enough to spot these projects that solve non-existent problems. Sometimes it's not even the fault of the founders. They might genuinely think they are solving a real problem, and they are not aware that this is not the best way to do it. That being said, you shouldn't take part in their delusion. The seventh issue is the lack of scalability. At this point in time, most cryptocurrencies don't scale too well, while also keeping a decent level of decentralization and security. Between speed, decentralization, and security, it is said that you can only have two at any time, but not all three. Some argue that this is just a matter of time until the technology progresses enough to satisfy all three criteria. There is a risk that this problem might never be solved. So keep that in mind before investing in projects where their success depends on scalability and speed, while also maintaining a high level of security and decentralization. Bitcoin, for example, is a project that can survive well even without scalability. It's not that big of a deal that a hipster can't pay for coffee at Starbucks. As long as the network is secure enough to allow people, or even nations, to transfer huge amounts of wealth anywhere on the globe in a matter of minutes, there is huge value in that alone, and those 7 transactions per second are sufficient. On the other hand, a platform that relies on people building dApps on top of it to increase in value must be able to scale and support all those dApps. Otherwise, you get another CryptoKitties scenario. The 8th and final thing is the cycles. If you remember my video about commodities, you know that they are highly cyclical, and the proper way to invest in them is to spot the trends and ride them. The same thing is true in crypto as well, except that the crypto market is like the commodities market on steroids. In crypto, uptrends really are uptrends, but downtrends will hit you harder than a truck. What is especially true about this market, more so than any other market, is that it also works and feeds on the greater fool theory. Here's something that the advocates of crypto don't talk too much about. What happens when a bubble bursts and the market goes down? I'm not talking about book theories or mental gymnastics used by experts to justify the bubble bursting. I'm talking about what really happens. What really happens is that the dumbest person on earth finally bought, and there's no person dumber than him to keep buying. Crypto, for some reason, is more attractive to inexperienced investors than any other market. When the horde of retail investors stampedes into this market, the demand and the prices go to the moon. The bubble bursts when there's no more dumb money left to keep the pressure up. Once the panic starts, the prices can drop 90% even in a week. When you combine the unusual attraction for this market with the lack of experience of the investors, you get these insane and aggressive cycles. Now, if you don't agree with me that this market is driven by dumb money, more so than any other market, then feel free to ignore the next part. If you do agree with me, then there are some consequences that derive from this premise, and you need to be aware of them. The first is that before you decide to invest, you have to objectively ask yourself how stupid you are, and where do you sit on this hierarchy of stupidity. I'm not saying this to insult anyone, because I also do this myself when I'm about to invest in a new asset that I don't know much about. If I know it's a highly speculative asset, and I know that it already went up significantly, the first thing I ask myself is how stupid am I compared to the rest of the people who want to invest in this? The second thing I ask myself is, who informed me about this asset? I suggest you do the same, because there is a big difference between being informed about an investment from the mainstream media and buying at the top of a bull market, and being informed about that investment from your autistic friend who has been in that market for 7 years and buying at the bottom when everyone else is too afraid to touch it. This way of thinking will help you somewhat gauge where in the cycle you are. If you know you are not one of the smartest, and if you know you are not one of the most informed, and if you know that you found out about that asset from the news, then there's a high chance you might be the dumb money, and also one of the last people to invest. Just don't. Wait for it to blow over, invest when the prices are at the bottom, and wait for the next cycle. The second consequence is that you can be the smartest person in the world. You can do amazing due diligence and pick the best cryptocurrency in the world to invest in. But if your timing is wrong, and if you did that research at the end of a cycle, it will take a long time before you see any gains. That investment will crash along with the rest of the market. It's extremely rare to see even a great coin go against the cycle. If the market is in a downtrend, almost everything goes down. It's better to just sidestep the crash entirely and wait to buy at the bottom. In a future video, possibly even my next one, I will actually show you a more scientific method on how to gauge where in the cycle the market is and how close it is to crashing again. Until then, try to be honest with yourself, don't get cocky, and don't act emotionally. There's always another cycle, another asset, another market, or another opportunity. In fact, one of the reasons why I made that video where I show you all the financial assets in the world was because I wanted people to be aware of them. I've seen way too many cases where people focus on a single market or a single asset like stocks, real estate, crypto, bonds, or commodities. While I'm well aware that you can make lots of money by becoming an expert in a single asset class, I don't understand why would you limit yourself like that instead of taking a more macro approach so you can track multiple assets and multiple cycles simultaneously. Now, I don't want to end this video on a somber note, so I'll finish with this. Whatever your opinion about the cryptocurrency market is, at the end of the day, it's still considered an asymmetric opportunity. Even with a small investment of, let's say, $1,000, which doesn't impact life too much if lost, the upside can be life-changing. Many cryptocurrencies increased in value 100x or even 1000x, and some even more. With enough research, luck, and patience, it is possible to pick a winner. So, from that point of view, it makes sense to invest at least a small sum of money if you understand how the market works. On the other hand, if you do invest, but you find out later that you didn't pick a winner, make sure that you don't fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy and pour more money in than you can afford to lose. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.